being that we're super close to Halloween now, again, if you know much about these arenas, it originally was called Samhain. And Samhain took place first in Ireland. And they used to carve out gourds and squash and things like this, carving spooky faces in them to ward off the spirits. This is what was believed, because the veil is thinner between the living and the dead. And that's why there's lots of spooky themes when it comes to Halloween. The interesting part is Halloween or Samhain, this is supposed to take place in autumn. So in the northern hemisphere, of course, it lines up with Halloween. In the southern hemisphere, it's at the end of April, because that's the peak of that veil, the opposite, and the peak of autumn. So this time of year, it's because it's getting close to the end of the year. Whether you're in the northern hemisphere or the southern, at the end of the day, it's still getting close to the end of the year. And that means that it's about that awareness of what things are no longer working for you. This can be friendships you've had, or relationships, work, anything really, anything that you have to basically evaluate. Anytime that, and this because we're in Scorpio season, anytime that we enter this type of energy, whether it's you have a lot of Pluto influence in your chart, or you have a lot of Scorpio influence, or you have a lot of influence of Mars even in your chart, or eighth house influences. All of these have to do with the baseline of Pluto, Scorpio, Mars. And that's about purging. It's about transformation. It's about pain and betrayal. Things that you have to let go of for one reason or another. This can be difficult. And the reason that it's so interesting in terms of Scorpio, especially, Scorpio is fixed water. This sign does not want to change. That's the thing. And when you speak to people who have strong Scorpio, they're pretty consistent in terms of what they think and what they feel. Again, it very much depends on where Scorpio is placed. But wherever it's placed, that's going to show where you're kind of immovable, I would say, resistant to change. But the Pluto influence makes that, well, even the Mars influence really, makes that impossible. Because Mars is about going to war. Mars is about conflict and facing it no matter what. Whatever the adversity is, you are a warrior, you're a soldier, and you're going to battle. And of course, in your mind, there is no losing. So that will approach, that particular mentality will consist and will be part of your way that you do things in the areas of that influence. Pluto is quite different to Mars in this respect. It's very much about digging deeper. How far does this go? I need to get to the bottom of it. I need to get to the truth. And I don't really care how I do that, but I will. This is more of the testing part of Scorpio. The tests, the betrayal. Can you be trusted? What are you going to do with this information? What are you going to do with this care that I give you? What's going to happen when you have that kind of power? Power dynamics are a big thing with Pluto and with Mars. They just approach it differently. So again, it very much depends on how much Scorpio influence you have in your chart as to how this is going to show up. Obviously, in human design, there are certain gates that link to Scorpio and Pluto. There's even some of the particular placements in human design that can relate to Pluto also. As in, there will be a conscious and unconscious, defined or non-defined part in your chart that relates to Pluto. Plus, it's also the understanding, because there's certain centers. There's 9 centers in human design. Again, you have to go with the point of both Mars and Pluto. Individual gates and the centers. With Pluto, it's going to be more about that intuition. So more of the solar plexus or even spleen. The more defined gates you have in this area, the more likely you're going to be linked to things that are similar to Pluto. You'll be a highly intuitive person. You'll look for patterns and recognition of those patterns, and then what to do with them. Mars, like I said, it's more of a direct hit, so those are different in terms of human design. In numerology, again, in terms of Mars, this would be number 1 for sure. Even the business minded one, I always forget. I'm not as good with numbers, I have to admit, but there's the business. I always forget which one that is. Is it 7? No, responsible caregiver. I always forget this one. It's not. 4 is also, because it's about rules and guidelines. The dedicated worker. Maybe it's 8. It could be 8. Sorry, excuse me. This just sort of came to me now, which is why I didn't have it prepared. Apologies. Contemplative truth seeker, that's definitely Pluto. 100%, so that's number 7. But let's try 8, shall we? I've got a feeling. I'm going to trust, yes, I was right. I need to trust my intuition. The business-minded leader, Mars. It could also be a bit of Saturn as well. Again, all these things kind of cross over. And they give you an idea of what your natural instincts are going to be in terms of that area of your life. Obviously, in numerology, your maturity number, your destiny number, your life path number, your personality number, all of these contribute to different parts of you. Same thing when it comes to human design and astrology. I think sometimes astrology is a little bit easier to understand. It's that middle ground. It's still very, very complicated, but because it's not in numbers, you can identify with it more because it's language. And even like quirks or personality traits, it's just an easier one, I think, to connect to, but they all have relevance. So when it comes to that, it's that understanding of looking, that's why this time of year can be hard. There can be sadness, grief. It's this idea of whatever part of you that you've gone through in terms of this year, it's now evaluating, consolidating. What stuff works and what stuff doesn't? These things that happened this year, do they really define who I am in the scheme of things? Is it a big part of the lessons I've learned, the pain I've faced, and now it's a big part of who I am? Or was it just something I went through, just temporary, just passed through it, and now it is what it is? Because our lives are so complicated, we meet so many different kinds of people, and we have different experiences. That, of course, is going to change. And it depends on where you're at in life. How well do you know yourself? How much clarity do you have about that? How comfortable are you in it or uncomfortable? So these kinds of things are important in that regard. And this is the time to evaluate that. So even if you're not a very heavy Scorpio, Pluto, or 8th house person, or even Mars, this is still the time of year where these themes are going to come up. That's why sometimes it can be difficult. And it's that preparation, isn't it, between the end of, I guess, from where Halloween starts to moving in towards where Christmas is. And then Christmas, by that time, that sets in. That's a whole different experience, but it's quite stressful in the modern day, really. So this is that time period where you're, I guess, wherever we have Scorpio, people who've got strong Scorpio will probably agree with me. I myself have a lot of this influence and even more of Pluto and Mars. But it's this feeling of drowning, which of course isn't a nice feeling, but it's even harder than that. It's like you have a rope tied to your ankle, and underneath that rope is a weight, and it's heavy. Already it's difficult to swim, especially if it's deep. But if you've got something that's pulling you downward, it's just that much harder. The emphasis on leaning into panic can be kind of a thing. But you never drown, you never die. You just keep going through it. You keep feeling like that over and over and over again. And it's not until you've obsessed over every single avenue of it that you finally discover perhaps how you feel about it at the other end. All of a sudden, that rope around your ankle loosens and it slips off, and you can swim to the surface and finally take that deep breath. So, on some level, you'll feel this because that's this part of the time of year. Now, I should get more into the other parts because each month has its own kind of energy and theme. But I think because I have so much influence of this particular time of year, it's the one I resonate with the most. So I find it easy to talk about. I guess that's like all of us. Whatever we resonate with, it's easier to talk about. But look, I think it's an important time of year, and that's why, like I said, I am creating these coaching services because I'd like to go deeper. The readings are good, but I tried to keep the price down on purpose so that people could, I think, just not surface, because I don't do surface, but maybe not go as deep, just to get those little snippets. But I was thinking that the coaching I'm going to include, and I did mention this, but I'm going to include the other things, whatever's relevant. And like I said, I want to do ones with relationships, life purpose, like a glow up of some description, like how to become your best self, how that looks, what's best for you, that kind of thing. But it's a good time to assess. And again, the more you're interested in manifesting the life that you want, the more you have to be willing to put the work in. Everything worthwhile requires work to get there. And it's about doing the right kind of work. That's why I think readings and coaching like this is so beneficial, because it can point you in the right direction rather than just trying to fumble through it. Sometimes it's also difficult if you're so used to your own life, which of course we are. We have our own insecurities and our own biases. And so sometimes that makes us not look at ourselves clearly. The other part, of course, which I think still quite strongly fits with Scorpio, Pluto, and Mars, is the idea of trauma and wounds. If you're not careful, these will feel like attacks against you. Ways that you're not good enough and that you're being punished for it. You can easily slip into blame, lack of accountability, and even victimization. None of these will help, of course. Instead, it's better to function on a level of understanding that these things happen to you to teach you things, to make you more resilient. You can either choose to learn from them, or you can sit there with that weight attached to your ankle and keep sinking. The choice is completely yours. But I assure you, if you don't face these truths, that's what happens on one level or another. And you got to think about this, not in terms of the physical part of it, but the idea of suffocating. Think about it in more of a spiritual point of view. Like, if you're suffocating, are you really going to make the best choices? Are you really going to be clear-headed enough to actually see adequate avenues of opportunity? Might be difficult. So I think that's why it's important, to think about those kinds of things and be aware of where you're headed, what you're thinking, what you're doing. And that's why I said I think the coaching will be helpful, because it sort of brings clarity, things to the forefront, makes it all the more interesting and also painful. But I think that's how we learn. We learn from pain as human beings. If you don't go through something painful, you'll just sit in the mundaneness of it and go, well, I don't love it, but it could be worse. I'll just sit here. Again, it depends what kind of person you are. Some people, even the mundaneness is just so boring, they would rather find, and that can be an interesting one too. You can end up buying drama that you don't even need simply to move away from the mundane, boring. And that's not going to be good. But that's what all this stuff is about. And the more I can look at you as an individual, as a person, and your placements, whatever it is that I'm looking at, whatever kind of reading or coaching it is, I then can help you get to the bottom of it. And I hope I think I'm pretty good at that, but put it in a way that makes sense so you can use it, work with it, and manifest the things that you want in your life so that you have less of that. But anyway, if you do want me to help you with that, I do have it. It's under Gumroad, Lemuria Insights. All of my social media accounts, everything to do with what I do here, is under the name Lemuria Insights. So whether it's Facebook, Instagram, I don't really do much for Facebook though, to be honest. Instagram, TikTok is my biggest, and then of course here. But all my readings at this stage, and I'm going to start creating the detail and everything for the coaching. So if that's something you want me to help you with, like, reach out. I don't know if I was able to link it here, but either way, it's on all the rest of the social media accounts, so you can always go and look at those. But yeah, let me know, and we can go from there. But either way, this in terms of the podcast and discussing things, I'll talk about all these things here, and hopefully you guys find it interesting.